Okay, starting recording. Oh no, I almost opened the Windows app. Crap. Okay, full screen. All right, cool. Welcome everyone to another podcast, Video Game Anatomies. And for new watchers here, because I might have a few new watchers, yes, my camera quality is really bad. I am aware of it, and I think it adds character to the podcast. So deal with it, people. It does kind of, because then you realize that I'm a really cheap bastard who doesn't want to get anything for any of his videos. So
also true.
Yeah, but again, I think that adds character to the whole stream. Also, I am joined today by Juan the dealer, who is here another time. Welcome, Mr. Juanzi. Hope you are.
What's up?
Hope you are ready to just talk about some weather and some lovely stuff. You know, weather. Weather, we've all experienced weather in our lives. I'm pretty sure of it. If it's hail, if it's rain, if it's snow, if it's like the craziest weather you can imagine out there, because you never know what any day might bring to you. So weather's out there, people, and it's something like
overwhelmingly crippling depression cloud. You never know.
that can sum up pretty much a lot of the millennials and Gen Z these days. But yeah, that's also quite a big forecast. But anyway, yeah. So weather's a very natural thing in real life. You know, it always happens. It's always out there, and it's like a process and everything. And the same goes for gaming. You know, at some point, obviously, weather just became an integral part of gaming, and it kind of like sometimes in most games these days you wouldn't even notice it. Like it kind of is so natural that you don't even like notice or pick it up all that much. But it is there, and it's always there. But again, if it's not in a game, that's also very noticeable. You immediately notice, like, oh, this game doesn't have a day or night cycle. Oh, this game doesn't have a storm. Like, there never storms in the game. So that's completely possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was comfy. It was something just that I always remember, like, as a childhood thing, just like as an out of body experience. Like, one of my favorite memories also as a child when I was gaming is like, when it's absolutely pouring or raining outside, you know, there's nothing really you can do outside. It's absolutely raining buckets and stuff. You're indoors, you got your nice headsets on, and you're jamming a game, be it Minecraft, be it Call of Duty, be it whatever you want it to be. But
Yeah.
you're inside,
And then, like, when the storms
pouring.
would get too bad, you're like, I better switch this in.
Yeah, that's also a very real thing. Power surges to consoles, like that's a real fear that like develops in you when you get older. As a kid, you're like, no,
also, there's the thing, like, speaking of Minecraft, like,
yeah. Oh no, did I lose you, Sean?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? No, don't tell me I lost me, poor Sean.
No, I lost you.
Oh, can you hear me now? Oh no.
Yes, I think your mic's fucking around, Rick.
It might. But carry on with what you were saying about Minecraft.
So, like, when we started playing Minecraft, bro, do you remember there being weather? Because there wasn't.
There was like rain. That was really it. But at the point, like, and snow, like rain and snow are technically the same thing because it was just technically rain inside a snowy biome, is what you're saying. Oh dear, I am losing you again.
Don't even think about it. I mean, Minecraft's weather has got so much better just since the game launched.
Oh yeah,
when Minecraft first started, there was no weather.
Yeah, no, that's true. That is true.
One biome.
It's like over its updates and patches and stuff. Like there's a lot of small details of Minecraft that has considerably improved. One of them being obviously, as you mentioned, the weather. Weather's much more detailed. And weather's got a lot more things. And long-standing games like that, generally, like you will see small improvements like that, and you can pick up on it, like you say, where it went from something really basic to just rain/snow. But now it's way more detailed. It's got way more events in the weather, and you will get to that at some point. But yeah, the big thing obviously is there was a point obviously in gaming where weather wasn't a thing. Like we didn't have the implementation of weather in games, and you can imagine back in the arcade times we didn't really have that. Didn't really need weather all that much. But also obviously if you think about weather, if you want to try and simulate in the game, yeah.
Yeah, But like if you look at like say Mario Kart, the closest thing to weather is the clouds in the background. Even although it's not weather as such, it is still a background and it's still a crucial part to the feeling of the game. Because if the clouds weren't there, the background would be empty.
Exactly. Now that's also a thing you
And
need.
it is nothing.
Yeah, and that's how the thing also you need to get to when you think about like back in the day when arcades and stuff around. Most of your backgrounds of arcade games were literally just a black screen, a backdrop, literally that the arcade game plays against. Whatever the arcade game may be, it's like maybe you shooting a bunch of spaceships, or you know, running around with your fisticuffs and taking someone on. It's almost always like a black backdrop or a like 2D static image of whatever on the classic old arcade games. It improved over time, but it was like that.
I mean, if you look at today's weather in games, I take Red Dead as probably the best example of it. I mean, there the weather is so detailed that the horses, call it, shrink and grow depending on the weather.
Oh yes, that one. That's also a really good detail. But they also, I think, horses also get spooked by the weather in that game.
Yes, they do.
So it's up to that point where we got into it, and it's like this beautiful journey that we're gonna go on, where we started with you know, arcade games, but even like the reason really behind why arcade games and stuff like that in the beginning obviously didn't have weather. It's another thing that tanks performance. Like nowadays, very easy to put weather in a game. We've got things like that in the engines of your game engines that you're running, and it's some sort of feature or system that's like natural and it's very easily integrated. Back then, it was a huge tank on performance. Like they avoided it because they didn't know how to implement it without like losing that performance you'd get. And like you can see that, you can still see that if you are one of the unfortunate few, i.e. me, that has a very crappy PC and you have tried to run a game that's usually dependent on weather. Case in point, I tried to buy The Forest on Steam the other day to like play with my friend because I think The Forest is not. I don't remember if Forest is not crossplay or not, but I remember it was on Steam sale really cheap, dirt cheap. I got it because I was like, okay, I'm gonna play with my friend, and like Steam has this kind of policy. Obviously, you can play a game 2-3 hours, and if it doesn't work or if you don't like it, you can refund yourself. And I'm playing the game, like testing it out, and the moment thunder in that game strikes, or like the wind starts blowing heavily through the trees, my entire game freezes. Entire game, like barely any frames run. The entire game freezes, and like I can't play. Granted, my laptop is not a gaming laptop. It is completely like out of its depth. I was just curious, could it run something like The Forest, which isn't, you know, the most demanding game out there. But no, it cannot run The Forest.
Actually, The Forest kind of is because of the AI in the game.
Yes, that is also a other thing. That is also other thing that gives you a bit of an issue. But yeah, as I was looking also into the topic, just a quick disclaimer: there isn't really that much of a timeline of this that I could figure out. Like I'm reading through articles, but there's not like someone didn't go and jot down like, oh, this is when this happened, this is when this was implemented, this is when this was happened. So I went and collected a bunch of articles out there. So I might be missing stuff, but I'm going to try and cover the most kind of important developments of weather. As long as we are aware of that, we can get started. As I mentioned, like the arcaded stuff, black backdrop, usually your game is just running and they were happy it's running, and like it had very simplistic features. Getting a high score, shooting a bad guy, 1 or 2 levels. That was basically the gist of arcades. That was what it was built for and what its purpose was. And then when we did get to some stuff, there was the very early depictions of weather was basically just a little graphic blip to tell you it's somehow weather, like a little graphic on the screen or something like that. They both came from the 1980s, so very early 1980s when this happened. If you have to think about the genres in that time, Mr. Juanzi, which 2 genres would you try and guess? Do you think was the first to like put weather in their games?
Weather in what context? Like variable weather.
So, okay, well, not like a weather, like a complete system, literally just a basic depiction of weather. Like you can tell, oh, it's a rainstorm, or oh, it's you know, it's a lightning strike.
Probably a racing game. So Forza, something like that.
Okay, so remember, this is
then
the 1980s, eh? So it's a bit further.
oh,
But racing
sorry,
game's a
I'm
good
looking.
guess, but that was only later. That was only later.
When was the first GTA launched?
Also 1990, so like around 1990. So it's unfortunately it's earlier than that you're looking for.
1980s? No, I don't know.
All right, it is two very obscure games. I will give it that, but we'll talk about the genres especially. So the first of these genres, the game was called Uranos. Uranos basically was a sort of PvP artillery type of game. Basically, the modern artillery type of game is the ones we played, like World of Tanks, World of Warships. Those are artillery games, basically, where almost, if I could sum it up, like it's a bit like World of Warship and World of Tanks is a bit more real time, but it's basically each person gets a turn to shoot at the other person like a projectile and then damage them. That's like the basic description of an artillery type of game. Uranos used weather as one of its weapons. Like you were this kind of weather demigod of whatever, or what, and you had to strike weather onto the opponent's house. Basically, who could destroy the other person's house first won. Like you got like, I think in your arsenal you had like lightning, hail, tornadoes, and stuff like that. But like then on the screen, you can see this depiction of lightning hitting a house, breaking off a little bit of blocks, a tornado coming around, like doing carnage and all that. It was a very, very early depiction, but it had weather for the first time in a game. And the second one, which if you did, I don't think you were around for the inventory podcast that we did like many, many, many moons ago. But in the 1980s, maybe I can't really, I can't really remember. It's like all of them. I feel like almost everyone was in every single one, so I can't even remember who was in which one. But basically, in the inventory podcast, we talked about a specific genre, like a very, very niche genre that's still semi around, but in the 1980s it was kind of a little bit more popular. It was called the kind of an inventory game or strategy game with your inventory. Basically, you have a set inventory and you have to manage this inventory, whatever the circumstances of what is. To kind of give an example of that, is this game. How did I write that its name? Utopia. Utopia is a game about you have crops basically to manage, and you have this like village or city to feed. And your literal goal in the game is you need to make sure these crops make it to the end of the harvest or the end of the year. And during the game, there would be stuff like rain. Rain is good for your crops. A storm can be bad for your crops if it like rains too much or it floods or like something happens that damages the crops. And then like something again like tornadoes or hail was destroys your crops completely. So it was like these random events that would happen, and you'd have to like cleverly plant your crops or manage your crops or manage the harvest to kind of like make sure you have enough to feed your people at the end of the year, and then that would be like a success or failure. So these were the two first genres that ever put weather in games. What you were saying?
Well, I mean, that genre is still going pretty strong, and I think, especially in South Africa with Farming Simulator.
Yes.
I mean, I know I occasionally re-download it and play.
Yes.
And weather's crucial in that game.
That was literally a note I wrote down here. I was like, this like game reminds me a lot of what we do in Farming Simulator. And I'm like, you also plant crops in Farming Simulator, and you also have the issue of like, oh, rain can help, but like hail and stuff can damage, and like other stuff like snow and frost and ripe can damage crops, and you have to be very clever about like how you plant them and how you like manage the crops and all that. Along with other stuff, obviously, like pests and all that. Like Farming Simulator went above and beyond completely into the farming realm, and is a very, very realistic depiction. Very entertaining game. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because we are simple farming-minded people, so we enjoy Farming Simulator. But it is a very entertaining game, I will admit.
As much as I hate to admit it, I still play it.
I would still play it. I legit would still play, but I'm waiting for like the new one, maybe the what was it, 2022 one to kind of, I think, drop price or something, because it's got new stuff in it. Like it's got vineyards and it's got like cotton and stuff like that I do want to try out, because there's a lot way more new crops. that I want to like try my hand at. And horses. It's also got horses and oats and stuff.
I mean, cotton is no, it's cotton. Sorry. Yeah, so the 2019 has cotton. That was the first one with cotton.
Oh, yes.
Yes. However, like the sugarcane of that was the most tricky to farm, but if you got it right, it was the most profitable. But hell, it was difficult because of the weather.
Yeah, I can imagine that. I remember I just played it safe. I just kept farming canola because I was like, I'll just plant a canola, likes the sunshine, fine with that. Plant a huge field of canola, harvest.
Because we got to get that oil, boys.
Yeah, we gotta get that oil. Ukraine ain't gonna do it, so we gotta do it now. Anyway, yeah. So the latest inventory game, I say it's a pretty niche one, but the latest I call it inventory game, but it's like completely not really definable. But Death Stranding is also very much completely an inventory management thing because that game also with its weather went completely above and beyond what we really perceived how much weather can make an effect because Death Stranding basically your career, you're a porter guy and stuff, and you have to deliver all these crucial goods to people. So you've got this massive load on your back that you're carrying around, and you're kind of walking around very lopsided, very clumsily. So like you have to be careful. I mean, the terrain you're navigating and stuff like that, it's not like freaking road. You're not driving in a bucky or something. You're like walking all the way, and the terrain is not easy. And weather makes it worse. Like when it rains in Death Stranding, the mechanic of rain is everything ages. It's called the timefall. So basically, because everything ages, your cargo, when it rains, expires like exponentially, which means you need to get out of rain as soon as it rains. You need to have cover and stuff for your inventory. And the rainfall also spawns ghosts or BTs, basically, that are also an enemy that comes to haunt you and like damage you and stuff like that. So it was a huge mechanic. Not even talking about like making the terrain wet that you're walking on, so it's very easy to slip and your inventory can fall off your back. It's very easy in the snow and the blizzards, like you can't see.
I remember watching your streams on that. You did that series.
Yes.
And, like the weather to me was crucial enemy. Like it was the worst possible enemy.
I know.
Because of that, and what it, like the terrain was challenging 100%. But the weather screwed you so badly.
It was so. Every time I start on a journey and I'm like thinking this mission's going to be all right. I start walking. I use all my nice equipment, my ladders, my at some point late game you get like zip lines, even a motorbike. There was a motorbike even to help you with transport and stuff. That like it couldn't go everywhere, but it could take you like a long way of the journey. And even with that, every time I start off, I was like, "This is fine. It's gonna be fine." And then all of a sudden, that clouds and it like starts to get gray. I'm like, "Oh no!" Because then I know every single time that cloud rolls in, it's here to screw me over, and it did every single time.
And then like the little flapper thing, that eye would just go crazy.
Oh, that's the thing that like warns you about the BTs being close.
Yeah.
And like that thing was scary. It's like one of the scariest mechanics that like it just like snaps, and it snaps like fast and it starts like turning its head like this, telling you like there's like a million enemies around you. And I'm like thinking like, oh crap, I can't do this, man.
I'm gonna die.
No, it was genuinely such a good way to create stress. Like using weather. I've never seen weather being used like that. So I found it genuinely amazing. But also, yeah, that was a very, very interesting way to use weather. And I wanted to ask you also the question, because you've also had your fair share of games with weather. Is there maybe a game that did weather really well for you, or like there was a really interesting way? You've mentioned now Red Dead Redemption already. That's also
Red Dead to me did it really well. The other one was Far Cry 2. Far Cry 2 was on point with weather.
Yes. I wanted to mention Far Cry 2 so much.
Yeah. Weather was really pretty in Origins.
Oh, in Assassin's Creed, yes.
Yes. The weather was beautiful there. So is the same in Valhalla, although Valhalla had very different weather. It was very gloomy, where Origins was, it had one of two things. Either you were in a sandstorm,
yeah,
or it was hot as hell.
Yeah. and it like created all that like effect of having like being in the heat the whole time. You'd see those like ghosts, you'd hallucinate,
Yeah,
you'd
yeah.
have the mirages and all that. That was so well done as well. I remember that game. That was really well
And the
done.
transition between it as well was brilliant.
Mm, mm. No, it's a really good. It like implemented weather excellently, even for just a desert where you expect there to be nothing. Like it really, really nailed weather. It's one of the strongest points for me. Also for Origins,
Yeah.
Origins had just had this mystique around it the whole time that like Odyssey and Valhalla didn't have so much. No, Origins was really good.
Yeah.
There
I
was
mean, even although it is just a desert, the weather was done properly.
It was. It was. And that's like, it's just a testament to tell you, like, you don't always need to have this beautiful, sprawling location full of life and whatever.
Valhalla.
Yeah. Did I lose you again?
Yeah. And in Valhalla, for example, it depended on where you were. Obviously, the weather changed. Yeah, you did for a second. In Valhalla, it depended on where you were, the weather was different. So, like, the more south you went on the map, the more sunny and shit it was. But the further north, the trees changed, everything changed, and eventually became snow. And then when you went to, say, Midgard or whatever, the weather was also different there. And then back in Norway or Finland, wherever it was, your weather was also completely different. You had
Oh no!
one class of weather over the whole map. The map's weather changes depending on where you are and what can happen with the weather.
Yeah, sorry, I dropped off the call, but I heard you what you said about the weather. Like, the north and the south is a huge thing because Valhalla is also a very huge map. Let's just put that out there as well. Valhalla is a huge map.
And there's a lot to do.
I know. You still haven't probably done half of the stuff there, have you?
No, I haven't.
I know the feeling. I know the feeling. Odyssey was almost exactly the same. I know. Anyway, but yeah, that was also genuinely one. There's another one last interesting one I did also want to mention. I did write these down in my notes. Ghost of Tsushima. I did a few streams on this game. Amazing game with weather as well. But like, it's a way like it did weather. It did weather realistically, but it also did weather a bit more stylistically. The reason being, it used weather how it was used, I think, in the culture of the samurai and stuff like this. So I'll give an example as just literally guiding you towards an objective or a mission. Um, if you swipe up to kind of get a hint of where to go, there would be like a wind just blowing in a certain direction, and then you knew you had to go that direction towards the objective and stuff like that. One a very subtle one. But there's another one, a really cool one. So in the game, the whole game is about like you have to either stick with the code of the samurai, stick with the code of honor and stuff, or you have to use a lot of underhanded tactics to defeat the Mongols. Poison, sneaking. You know, sneaking is not very honorable for samurai and stuff. They have the whole duel and everything. So sneaking is a big no-no for them, and like other stuff. But like poison and stealth was like a big no-no for them. And if you use more of that to kill the Mongols, or if you invest more skills into those skill trees, because you had a samurai skill tree, and then you had what they call the Way of the Ghost skill tree. That was the no-no one. If you invested more skills in the Way of the Ghost, or stealth killed and poison killed a lot of Mongols, it would rain more often in your game. Purely to tell you, like the weather would tell you morally or in the code of honor, you're being very in the wrong.
Yeah.
That was a really cool way to like show weather off in the game, just to like kind of set the tone. Because tone wise, like if you keep doing it and stuff, like your perception of honor is totally gone after a while. It's like you just have completely like embraced kind of the way like of the ghost and everything like that, and now it's raining in your game and the tone is set like that. It was really, really well done, that game. but a very interesting way just to represent it.
Well, yeah, I can imagine. I never watched any of those streams. I was busy with something, but that is interesting.
It is. I should get back in that game. They released the DLC and everything, but like the game itself was just so beautiful. But I played it on, the streams weren't really worth watching because the problem is I played them on my PS4, and to this day I can tell you with confidence that was the worst game my PS4 has ever experienced. I have never ever heard my PS4 that loud before or since. It was so loud. I think there was one stream I played in a room where there was an echo. But like I didn't process that information before, and so I'm sitting there and literally all I can hear ringing in my ears is it's like my PS4 like dying on me because he's trying to like play the game. And like I was streaming, so that's all you hear in my background. Like you can't hear the dialogue, you can barely hear me because all you hear as the thing is like dying on me. So yeah,
Well, I mean, it'd be like that sometimes.
it does be like that sometimes. That's why old PS5 fridge over here is doing me well. It's not had a peep since. Shame.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. Lekkers. But yeah, we'll go quickly back to the past now. So we mentioned graphical representation of weather was really the biggest thing at the time. Like, oh my gosh, there's weather in your game. How did you do it? How did you make it represent? And yeah, memory and performance wise, that's why I avoided it. We said that. And it was a common reason why a lot of mechanics came into the fray later. Naturally, like a lot of times, a mechanic only came into the fray when memory and performance wasn't an issue anymore. Even something like a save didn't come into the fray until they could figure out how to like do that with memory and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the coding, like how did you back in the day how would you code rain? Now it's obvious, but back then it was a big thing because it makes your environment more alive, and anything to do that in a game is generally quite difficult because it's wind. How do you move all the trees? How do you move all this? How do you move that? Make the hair move? Things like that.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I still marvel to this day some of the feats like that is like that they managed back in the day. Some of the feats they did with memory and like performance is blows my mind. Like I think we take a lot for granted of what we knew now and what we know now, and like just to get a game to save or just to store that thing on memory for them was like amazing because it's never been done. Nowadays it's just like, oh, you got like a really weird ass nose. These graphics of the game suck. What the hell? That's literally the gist of gaming these days. I saw a message in the server. I just wanted to see. Oh, it's you. I thought someone was messaging to try and join the thing. Never mind. Okay. Back to full screen then. But yeah, cool. So we talked about memory and stuff, but that's also like a little bit while. It took a little bit longer for the others to get around to it or to kind of like progress really, to evolve weather really. This is like some games, bits and bobs there had weather in the game. It was just a representation, nothing more, nothing less. That's what you got. And then when it did finally get into that point where you could use it or they could use it to represent and stuff like that, a lot of other genres started picking it up because obviously every sort of genre had a different idea of how to use weather. So I'll run through a quick few examples. From platformers, there was this game called Ninja Gaiden 2, but we all know platformers. It's just hippity hoppity hoppity on a bunch of ledges. Get through the level. There's a few like challenges with enemies and stuff along the way. There's obviously get to the end of the level and like see how much you can navigate without dying. This game was one of the first ones to have weather, and because like you were doing hippity hoppity hoppity on ledges on mountains, it decided to be a real piece of work and introduce wind mechanics in the game. So it would just like ever so slightly, you see the like wind flow go, and it would blow your character as you jump, like woo! You had to make sure to like you were in line with the ledge, otherwise you just blow you off the mountain. And you'd have to restart the whole level. One of the first times like you've seen that before. I mean, like if you don't know that, like we know it as gamers. Like when you see a little wave animation like this go across the screen. We know it's wind.
Yeah,
We know it's going
like
to
this
like affect
leaks, like,
something.
no.
Now imagine some poor gamer launches up his game. He's played a few like Mario's back in the day. He knows like how Mario works. Like, this platform would be easy. All of a sudden, his whole character's just blown off the side of the mountain. He's losing his mind. He's like, whoa, we've never seen it before. Yeah. No, I think sometimes like I am very grateful for the time and era I've grown up in gaming. Like we are at the forefront of gaming and like everything here is so radical. But what I would give to be one of those people to be amazed at something like that, literally like wind blowing off the side of a mountain, or like thinking like something like Pac-Man was next gen graphics. Oh my gosh, I've never seen this before in my life. There's a moving thing on a screen, and I control
but
it.
that were the early. Those were the early ways of doing it. Because how do you depict wind when the player can't feel wind?
Exactly, and how do we like? Yeah, as you said, how do you depict wind? We know now, like this is almost a universal sign of there's wind and stuff. But like they had to figure that out back in the day, and it's not like something you can just communicate in a language. It's something that you want to communicate on a screen, be it universal or something like that. So it's very interesting how they went about it. RPG games started also to adapt them, but they didn't. As I said, a lot of genres use it for their own like reasons. RPG games adapted them, but they wanted to use it to tell the story. As I mentioned to you now, like think about Ghost of Tsushima. It told the story of like if it was raining, your morality and stuff was not as good, or your honor was not as good, and if it was sunny, you were more on the side of the samurai. Early RPG games like Legend of Zelda, as well as a game called Willow. So Willow actually used wind and stuff like that when enemies were nearby. Like it would be sunny through the whole game, you'd walk around in the whole game, and then all of a sudden the wind would start blowing, and like the whole tone of the game changed, and like the skies were grey and stuff. Then you suddenly knew, oh, there's gonna be combat, or there's enemies in the area. It like immediately was a telltale sign that like there's a threat. And in Legend of Zelda, in its storytelling, like I think one of the games, you wake up in a cave, and you realize that Zelda, the princess, was now kidnapped. And you start in a storm. You start in this huge storm, and you have to like get into a castle. And like it was one of the games of the first times the sound design stuff was used, because obviously how a rainstorm makes it just goes the sound like it's a rainstorm, rain's falling down, water's falling down, it goes, and you're walking through the rainstorm, and you go into the castle, and as you're in the castle, the sound all of a sudden muffles, like real rain in real life. Sound muffles because you're inside. And as he walks deeper, deeper, deeper into these castle dungeons and stuff, the rain just dies down, dies down, dies down. But this was 1980 something, 1991 maybe. People were losing their mind. Imagine that sound design for the first time in a game. Like it like literally imitates real life. I think people lost their damn minds at that, like how well that must have been done. And how to record that, like how the hell did they know to put like something like that? How the hell did they implement that sound design in a game? And like knew when the player was outside and stuff like that, and like when the storm should die down and all that. That's like something that I can't get my head around now, and they were doing it in 1991.
Yeah, but also that time period, they were still flying rockets to the moon and stuff. So
yeah,
well, not quite. That part had gone.
That ship had sailed. Yeah,
but you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you mean. They were flying people to the moon using like their freaking Casio calculator.
Exactly.
But
it was the base one. It didn't have the sine, cos, and tan functions.
Someone had to write it down on a board. I remember that.
Yeah.
No, there was that. It still boggles my mind sometimes. And then same thing with storytelling. Action games, beat 'em ups also use rain a lot to tell you a story of like there's dark times ahead, the enemies are a lot and stuff like that. And then interestingly, actually, no, I should mention there was also another thing that like obviously because movies started doing it a lot, video games could easily imitate movies in terms of their storytelling. So when there was a movie trope, usually around weather, usually a lot of time you'd see that same trope in video games later on. Like it would imitate the same trope that movies did. For example, say for example, it starts raining in the game and you go into a location and you're busy in the location stuff, and when you come out, the storm has stopped and now it's all of a sudden sunny. What does that tell you? Time has passed. That's literally all it is to tell you. It's just a movie trope. We've seen the same thing, like just a quick example. You remember in Far Cry 3 when you went into a cave full of mushrooms? And I remember you had to do that mission at night or something.
Yes.
And then you come out and
You
it's
have to
like
go to-
daytime, and the reaction kind of is like, what the hell? Why are you so long down there?
Yeah.
That
Well,
was like,
I mean, it's like the realization, like you go into a cinema in the day and you come out and it's dark. It confuses you. The same thing happened.
yeah. No, it's like that suddenly, like, it's almost like just a jump through time. It's like, because your senses aren't like all of a sudden like, has to adjust to it all of a sudden. But same thing, movie trips. And the other one, obviously, a lot of times when they're in games, even recently, like there was one in Cyberpunk as well. A lot of times in games, they'll use heavy weather to kind of force the characters to go to a location or stuff, either to like be there for whatever reason, or to like just recollect themselves, have a little break in the story and stuff, or just like develop characters. For example, in Cyberpunk, you do this one side quest with Panam, or should I say Panas, and like you're driving around and this massive sandstorm breaks out and it's like really bad. You can't see anymore where you're driving and stuff. And they say there's an abandoned hotel up ahead. We're gonna stop over there because the sandstorm is so bad. And you get out of the truck and stuff. You go inside. You bar everything shut because now the sand is going in, and it's getting cold now. So they get a fire list and everything. And then like you have this conversation with Pan Am, on the like a sleeper couch. You have a conversation with her, and that's actually the start of if you want to romance the character. That's how you start the romance with that dialogue. And how did you get that? Because the sandstorm blocked you and I had to spend the night there in the abandoned hotel. Exactly the same as
Yeah,
what a
but
movie
then,
would have done.
yeah, but then the same thing happens or applies to your what's those games called? Your Fortnites, your Apexes, things like that, your
Oh yeah.
Warzones. They're using weather to force players into a certain place.
Yeah, the storm and stuff. Same thing. Like they wanted
Yeah,
to
it's the same
they're
concept.
using weather to their advantage and stuff like that. And it's also to they also use sometimes environments to tell a story. For example, they'll cut off a whole section, say, no, that section's cut off now because something happened to it. Like some season, like say season 7, there's poison in that area. You can't go to that area anymore. It like locks out a piece of the map completely,
Yeah.
or something like that. They also tell a story of that. It's a lot of environmental storytelling you see it nowadays in a lot of games. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that was also like most of this thing, and we it started, getting into the beast of it. And then interestingly, it stopped a little bit as soon as we hit that like peak of when first-person shooters started for the first time. Now in 1994, when Doom rolled out, Wolfenstein rolled out, and the other Quake rolled out, and the other first-person shooters came along. Because the reasons, funny enough, there was weather in games, but it wasn't like evolving. Because the thing is, when it comes to first person shooting, now you're thinking of like there's an entirely new camera angle. There's a bunch of new stuff going on. You'd had a HUD for the first time. You have weapons and stuff for the first time that like load and reload. There's a lot of monsters like coming at you now in first person. So they had so much more to think of that weather kind of took a back seat in this one. And obviously, again, now memory and performance becomes a thing again because now, I mean, like you're dealing with a whole different beast. It's not this top-down thing with a top-down camera anymore, or like a third-person thing. It's now a first-person thing with the camera and stuff, and like there's way more going on in terms of like the game that like it's just one of those things that whoever had to take a backseat. It wasn't one of the things that could evolve really with it. They had like a million other things to focus on. So
Yes.
in Doom and Wolfenstein and stuff like that, all of the level design and stuff, like you'd also kind of see it. Like there wasn't really anything major of weather going on. Some genres still got into it. Like I thought you would enjoy this one. Real time strategy got into weather a little bit around this time, around the 90s, going into the 2000s. So like
Yeah.
for example, real time strategy, like you got your units and stuff like that, and you have to like kind of strategize about how you're going to conquer the map or conquer like whoever it was in the server or whatever. Sometimes,
Yes.
if you were playing this type of game, I don't remember it all that much in Age of Empires, but I have seen games where, for example, if you were on a cold map, let me put it to you this way. Let's say you have a map that you can play either in a season of winter or a season of summer, and that map was full of rivers. I think this game was
Yeah.
called like Company of Heroes or something like that. Um, and if you played this map when it was summer, it would just be a normal river, it would just be a normal forest, and it's more or less your run of the mill map. if you play this map during winter, the rivers would be iced over. What does that mean? Your troops can go over the river, which means if you're on the other side of the river, if you're set up on the other side of the river, you suddenly had to mount way more defenses because, I mean, now they can just cross the river like that and get to your base. So, like, it completely messes with your mind, like, in terms of, like, this is a real thing that can just easily happen. Because it could happen in real life. I mean, a river easily ices over in real life. And, like, all of a sudden you can now walk over it or something. So, it's something real that they thought about. And it's such a nice touch. Because, I mean, it's such a small detail. But they thought about it and they made it a nice touch. And all of a sudden your gameplay suddenly changes. Although I don't remember. Like, yeah?
Not all games get easier when it's snowing or iced. Some do, some don't.
Some don't,
Minecraft, for example. Minecraft in the snow biome is much more difficult than it is in any other biome.
Well, than it used to be, because usually the snow biome was literally just, oh, it's magical snow, there's a spruce tree here, we can go mine some spruce trees and we can just live in the snow. Now it's like, you can fall through snow, you can freeze, there's mobs that are only in the snow, like strays and stuff like that. Some mobs don't spawn in the snow, you get less food. Now it's all of a sudden like, freaking, oh, it's hell to live in the snow.
Yeah.
It's kind of like completely flipped the script. But that's what they want to do in games. Like, they want to evolve that to, like, where weather becomes a real factor in a lot of their games. That's how they slowly began to realize it as, like, time progressed on. Or slowly began to realize it. So, other games that also did it, God mode games, if you played, like, Tropico or SimCity or one of those city builder games, weather all the time was also a factor. If you had, like, for example, a game of natural disasters or stuff like that, and it would wreck your buildings, it would wreck your buildings, just like a natural disaster would. If hurricane comes along, it's not just going to be a friendly little wave, it's going to freaking decimate your whole thing. What was funny about Tropico is all that, like, you control islands, but you control islands, I think, in most of the games, if I'm remembering correctly, you control islands during the Cold War. And, like, it was, like, near Cuba and stuff like that. It was, like, those islands over there. And, like, when a hurricane comes around, comes and wrecks your whole, like, island, all of a sudden you get, like, sent money from the USA and the USSR. And then you start building foreign relations with them because of the natural disaster and stuff like that. That was just, like...
I played a lot of Tropico. I loved that game.
That game was so fun.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
It was very good.
It is basically Cold War era. You're an island and you need to build alliances with either the East or the West. And based on your choices, it changes things.
That is exactly pretty much what Tropico was. And it, like, all I remember from Tropico was I remember I was so close to winning the game. I was so close. I was 2 months away. Like, I think literally the objective was I needed to survive 30 years as president of my island, and it was hell. Freaking, my people rebelled. Every year was a natural disaster. Every year, like, the export prices fall. It was freaking hell. And then I was 2 months away from winning. And then all of a sudden, the USSR invades because I didn't, like, keep up my foreign policy with them, and I lost. I was like, oh my gosh, I was 2 months away, and Putin was like, no.
Yeah.
Oh, Putin. But yeah, so
it was more likely Scotland, but anyways.
yeah, also. But yeah, God mode games, RTS games use the, like, weather to, like, simulate also real life and to also adjust with your strategy. Racing games, as you also mentioned before, racing games is also all about practicality when it comes to weather. Obviously, like, the effect weather has on racing is handling. If it's wet outside, if it's muddy outside, if it's icy outside, handling is going to be way more difficult. That's just how it is. That's just the natural way of things. And that's what they tried to start implementing around the 90s, also with the early Need for Speeds were, like, simulation races and the Gran Turismos. Later on, the Forzas, etc., etc. And we've gotten to a point where, like, weather is super realistic. Do you remember Dirt Racing 2? Like that rally... Dirt Rally 2. Sorry, Dirt Rally 2. That was really realistic.
Yeah, that weather was difficult. Oh my goodness.
I remember, like, you can take a corner, and I'm thinking, like, I'm taking this corner at, like, what, 40 k's an hour. And now I'm thinking in my head, like, a rally driver takes this corner at, like, 100 k's an hour. And I'm thinking to myself, like,
Yeah,
okay,
I like
I'm gonna go 40 because I mean, and I just need to, and I still slid my back out. I was like, how? How? I'm taking this corner at 40. I'm driving like a granny.
Yeah.
No, it was literal, like, honestly, that game was so good with it, but it was so fun as well. But yeah, all of these genres, like I said, implemented weather in a clever way in the 90s. They started getting into it, but like no one started evolving it because the mainstream games at those times, shooters, didn't feel the need to evolve it. They were kind of focused on their own thing, getting first person stuff out there and stuff. But yeah, the biggest evolution really for weather would be next in line would now be the graphics. As I said, now we have weather, we've implemented it. Now we want to make it look good. We want to make it look realistic, like the real deal and stuff like that. Um,
Yeah.
there was some really cool features that like the first person shooters finally implemented. So a very early one, for example, there was this game called Metroid Prime in 2002. I read about this and I thought this was such a cool detail. So if you are in a storm, because this was also one of those characters that wears like a helmet with a visor. If you are in a
Yeah.
storm in this game and you look up, the rain droplets, you'd see them forming on your visor and you can see them running down your visor. Small detail, but I mean
That's proper.
that's a 21-year-old game. That's a proper small cool little detail for a game.
Yeah.
But like I want to give my praise and my roses now to the game really that ran away with it. There is no other word for it. It was the big boys at Crisis. You know Crisis. You know how always people joked in the olden days like, can it run Crisis when they talked about like your PC and stuff? Like, can it run Crisis? Will your laptop run
Yes.
Crisis and stuff? Like those boys at Crytek really made something that was unlike anything we've ever seen. Like how important Doom and Quake and Wolfenstein and stuff was just to the first person shooter in general. Crysis was the granddaddy when it came to graphics for first person shooters. Like it was just insane how much it did. I'm going to go through a little bit because the reason Crytek's also so important is obviously you remember the first Far Cry was developed by Crytek. That was their game.
Yes.
And then like they only gave it to Ubisoft later on. In the game, the engine, you know, the engine Far Cry 2 runs on, is they called.
Yes.
They started using the Dunia engine, but the Dunia engine was actually just a modified Cry engine. So from
Yes.
Far Cry 2, the same weather you like said back in the beginning of the podcast, same weather you said that was really good in Far Cry 2 was because it was the modified engine of the Cry engine that already had the weather and stuff. And funny enough, I don't know why they haven't done it like properly yet again and stuff, but I don't know if you've noticed in the new Far Cries, there is almost no weather in the new Far Cries. I'm almost sure of it. There is no weather.
I did notice that. I mean, so Far Cry 4, sorry, still used Dunia.
Yeah.
I think they all did actually.
They all do, but then there's like
even-
Dunia 2 after a while. There's like they upgraded to Dunia 2. Sorry, I'm just giving the cat food quickly. That's why I'm moving across the screen. But yeah, they all use Dunia. There was a Dunia 2 later on, but I mean, I'm still a little bit baffled because I understand like you've modified the CryEngine and stuff, and I understand maybe it's not your own asset, but like it was in Far Cry 2, which already used the Dunia engine. How the hell did you not import that asset and then just beef that up when you were making the other games? Like, how did you lose that?
I mean, Far Cry 5, it rained. Far Cry 4, I don't remember any weather.
No,
Far
it
Cry
wasn't.
3, I don't remember squat weather either.
No. Far Cry 6, I don't think has weather either. I think literally like
No.
either that was not very like noticeable. I remember Far Cry 2's weather. Far Cry 2 really had good weather and fire. It had really good fire mechanics as well in that game.
Yes. And really scary fire mechanics as well.
Yes, because it spread like nothing else. You throw a Molotov and like suddenly the entire map was burnt down. Like, oh my god, what happened?
And you were involved in everything.
Yeah, all of a sudden, like rebels from the other side of the island comes because you somehow burnt down their huts. You're like, I wasn't even there. I wasn't even there. It was a stray Molotov. No, it was really good. But Crisis was the holy grail. Crisis came out in 2007, and the way Crisis is still talked about to this day for its like graphics and its achievements in that. So I'm gonna sum it up really quickly because Crytek's baby is really like what like inspired a lot of graphics in terms of like not even just web, but like graphics in general for first person shooters and other stuff today. So originally, Crysis was a PC only game. They stated it when they were developing it was going to be a PC only game because they said there is no way the PS3 and the Xbox 360 at the time could handle these stuff that we wanted to do in the engine. No way. The technology is too behind. We're only gonna make it a PC game and stuff. Later they did do console ports. I'm not sure how much of the console port, like how much technology was carried over or when the console port was done. But in the beginning and when it released, it was a PC only game, straight up. That was what it was. And we're talking about like there was day-night cycles in the game, realistic storms. But the biggest one it did, really, really big one as well, because of how well it does in mechanics. This game brought snow to first-person shooters properly. Now, I'm not talking about snow as just like it was a white texture for grass. Like it's the same grass you usually walk with, but now it's just colored white. I'm talking about this was snow as if it was an actual layer of snow on grass. And I'll explain a little bit like, how important or cool that was. For example, take, in Far Cry, even in Far Cry, like we talk about this also, when you are stealth in Far Cry and stuff like that, a lot of the stealth in Far Cry and now Crysis as well does that is if you hide in foliage or bushes or stuff like that. It's the whole thing about that. Now you're less visible. The enemy can't see you as well when you're in foliage and stuff like that hidden, right? And you know how foliage is. Like you move a bit in foliage, the foliage kind of bends with you, or like you can see through the foliage and stuff like that because like you're moving about in the bushes and stuff like that. Now it's snowed. Now because like in real life, the snow has fallen on the bush and the foliage and stuff. Now it's a rock solid thing. Not all of a sudden like a bendy bush anymore. It's like a rock solid thing with a bunch of snow on it. And usually, in games like Far Cry and Crysis, you can shoot through the foliage when it's dry, when it's green. You can shoot through the foliage at enemies and probably kill them. Now, if you shoot the foliage in Crysis when it's snowed on, it's almost solid. It just hits the snow. That layer of snow, because it's snowed, all of a sudden, it's a solid object.
I mean, talking about weather in first-person shooters, the effect it has on optics. I know Far Cry 2 did this really well as well.
Yeah.
When it's raining, the optic is wet. It has water drops in it.
Yes.
When it's a snowstorm, or not snowstorm, when it's a dust storm, your optic gets sand in it.
Yeah, it gets like dirty almost and stuff like that.
Battlefield did it really, really well with Battlefield V and the one before it.
Yes.
Where if you lay in the mud after it had been raining, your optic would get all mudded up.
Yes, the entire gun even like would get completely.
Yeah, and it was more prone to jam and things like. Well, I don't
Far
know.
Cry 2 also did that, jamming guns.
Yeah, but like it becomes more difficult to shoot with a wet optic and things like that.
Exactly. It was these little stuff, but like Crysis was the proponent of a lot of this stuff. Crysis also had the thing, just a little touch again, because there's snow as a layer on the things. Now all of a sudden your footsteps are way more audible in the snow. You have to like have a much wider range when it comes to like engaging an enemy because of that snow thing. Like when you step in snow, you can hear those footsteps much more clearer. But like that's still insane to me. It's 2007 that they were able to implement this stuff. It blows my mind, and like it was just a propagation of that onto other first-person shooters, and that's even other genres in general. When it comes to the graphics of weather and graphics of maybe stuff in general. But yeah, no, that was a really good one. And Far Cry 2 was basically also just a little complement of that as well, because it released in 2009 around there, so nearly the same time frame. And then the final stop on the evolution of our little weather journey is that game developers thought like maybe now they've gotten it nailed down. At this point, they were getting it nailed down how to make it realistic in games. We've gotten to that point where it was realistic in games. But they thought, what if we go even one step further? what if we could imitate real weather? Not just make it realistic, imitate your actual weather. So augmented reality games, which we don't see much of anyway, like we don't really play much of that, but I do have to mention this because it's really cool. Augmented reality games, which are mostly mobile stuff, use the real weather data on your phone to simulate the weather in game, to try and make it like close to what you're experiencing currently. So, for example, if it's raining currently where you are, it will rain in the game you're playing. So there was this like mobile game. I think it's just called CSR2 Racing or something like that, like a racing game, normal racing game. If it's raining where you are, if the weather data it's collecting from your phone says it's raining, it will rain in the game. And obviously, if it's raining in the game, it's going to be more difficult to handle because you're driving in the rain. So
yes,
that was a pretty.
Another big one in that same context is Microsoft Flight Simulator has the option.
Oh yeah.
To say real time weather. So
Yeah,
it's not only the weather where you are will be in game, not that it's really a game, but where you are flying in the world. If the weather is if the weather is bad there, say it's snowing in Canada, which is probable, and you're flying there, it will be snowing in game.
Yeah, no, and that's the amazing thing, the fact that we have so much telemetry and so much data available to access that we can just do that now in games. Oh yeah, we have all that data available to us, so we can just implement it in games now and stuff like that. It can imitate weather at any part of the world if it can collect the data on it. It's so amazing. The other one, it's a little bit of a shame that Dylan's not here because I think he would have enjoyed. He knows about it obviously, but like he would have been more pumped to hear this. Pokemon Go, that other mobile game that like everyone plays and like collects all the Pokemon stuff. That has a really amazing weather mechanic because I don't play Pokemon or understand Pokemon all that well. But if I read this correctly, basically certain Pokemon only appear in certain stuff. So like for example, when it's daytime, some Pokemon will spawn. When it's nighttime, other Pokemon will spawn. And when it's raining, other Pokemon will spawn. So the game collects your weather data, and now based on what like is happening at your place, obviously it's spawning the Pokemon for you to go collect based on the weather data it has. I thought that was pretty clever because it's actually using your weather data for something really useful that's practical and like within the rules of the Pokemon world to go collect stuff. Like I said, I don't really understand the whole concept of Pokemon, but I thought that was a really cool mechanic. So, yeah.
Well, I don't know Pokemon either, so I can't comment there.
I can't, as I said, it would have been cooler if Dylan was here. But yeah, I'm also just a bit more concerned because that game, like, every time I think about Pokemon Go, I'm going to hear about someone who was on their phone like this, crossing, a street to go look for Pokemon, and they're just going to get run over. I've thought of that so many times. I'm like, there's people in this world that's probably happened to that you don't hear about in the news and stuff. Like someone was looking at their phone, probably even driving. Imagine someone driving and they're looking at their phone like for a Pokemon. I bet you that's happened. I bet you 100% that's happened.
But the cool part about that game is it forced people to go
outside
to places where they wouldn't normally go.
Yeah, no, I like that about the game. I'm just concerned people's attention spans are not like streetwise. So like
it showed the world that people are not ready for the world.
Yeah, that's also a thing. But hey, as I said, Pokemon Go got people outside. It's got a cool weather mechanics and implementations, and it's gotten people active. So more to that. But yeah, that's pretty much been our weather report for this podcast. From where we started with the basic graphical implementations of Veranos and Utopia to, as Mr. Juanzi pretty much summed up also at the beginning, Red Dead Redemption 2, where like it's the ultra hyper realistic stuff when it comes to weather. Like it's so close to the real deal. Like it feels so surreal. But yeah, it's gone through a lot of evolution, and I'm really excited for what there is to come next. Now, speaking of that, that is our last question for the podcast. When you think about the future of what we can do possibly in gaming for weather, where do you think we're gonna go? What do you think we're gonna see next?
I'm honestly not sure. I think the only thing that can possibly happen is it becomes more and more realistic.
Yeah, I think we're
in
gonna
the
also
sense
move towards
of
that point.
yeah, I reckon it is going to reach a point where it can no longer get better.
Mm. I'm looking forward to like it being used more stylistically, like Ghost of Tsushima has and some others have. I'd like more of that, but that obviously is up to the game developer and them to like put it out. The other one, there is one weather thing I haven't seen a lot of, which we might see more of, is fog. I've seen fog in gaming. I mean, fog, mist. We've seen it. It's just a low visibility kind of thing where fog is and stuff. But I'd like to see it implemented way more realistically in gaming. Think about racing games. Driving in through fog in general. Like there's a certain way headlights work in fog. There's a certain like distance we start to perceive stuff, and if you're going at speed like a car is, there's a certain way it goes through fog and stuff like that. I think that would be cool if you can see more fog, but not just in racing games in general. Like there's cool implementation thing you can do with fog. There is one cool new system coming out now that like it's not fog directly, but I think it might affect fog. I don't know how much have you seen about Counter Strike 2. The new Counter Strike 2 is coming out now in a few months.
No, I haven't seen anything about it.
This game, dude, I'm not gonna play it because I know the sweats that are gonna be on this game. Like I'm going to avoid it like the plague. Basically, my laptop can't run it already, but there's gonna be so much sweat in the game. But the features this game has, some of them are amazing. So they have this new revised smoke grenade system, right? You throw a smoke grenade, and it like creates another smoke and everything. If you shoot through the smoke with your bullet, the smoke around the bullet where it travels will disperse. I've never seen that in a different game. Like literally, that where the bullet travels is gonna go like this in the smoke. Like have a little hole before it like closes again. And if you throw like a grenade that like creates that whole kind of shockwave thing, the smoke will also disperse. So you throw a grenade, it goes go, and it will reveal someone. Can you imagine the MLG plays some of those people are gonna do? What they're gonna do is probably just gonna throw a grenade, it's gonna blow the smoke open, and someone's gonna quick scope you through that. I can see it already. I'm telling you.
You're gonna get snapped, bruh.
I know. That's why I wanna see this so badly. But I'm not gonna play the game because I already know I'm gonna get wrecked. I know this way, so they're gonna play this game. First day it's coming out. Everyone's gonna want to rank up. You know how Apex is every season. Same thing. Everyone's gonna want to rank up.
I know. I'm one of those people.
I know. It's the torture you choose, huh? But anyways, yeah, that is the end of the podcast. Thank you very much for everyone who gave this a listen. Thank you very much for everyone who tuned in. If you do have anything else about whether to add, feel free to leave that in the comments or in some feedback on stuff. Thank you also for Mr. Juanzi for joining me for this fine hour. I hope you also learned something. I hope you also got to share most of your thoughts. And yeah, I hope to see more weather soon. But yeah, thanks again, my man. Until next time, everyone, I hope you stay safe and stay healthy, and we will all chat soon.
Yes, indeed. Cheers.
Cheers.